Night came early in 1943, not because the sun set faster, but because lights were rationed and silence was safer than glow. Inside a narrow room, several men sat without speaking. Boots stayed on, coats stayed buttoned. The day had already taken everything it could. No one talked about tomorrow. Hands moved instead. Something small slid across the table. Paper against wood. A soft sound, almost nothing. It wasn't food. It wasn't medicine. It didn't fix broken machines or shorten the war. And yet, shoulders relaxed, eyes focused. For a few minutes, time behaved differently. The room did not feel smaller. The future did not press so hard. Laughter didn't appear, but neither did despair. What happened in those moments was not escape. It was containment. Fear stayed inside the walls. Fatigue stopped spreading. Minds rested without sleeping. No officer ordered it. No manual mentioned it. No report would record it. But night after night, the same ritual returned. Quiet, repeatable, almost invisible. Because survival, sometimes, begins when nothing else is left to do.
It was just a deck of cards. Paper, ink, corners already worn soft by too many hands. It didn't arrive through supply chains or crates stamped with warnings. It slipped into pockets, into helmets, into spaces between rations and letters from home. No one issued it. No one tracked it. No one rationed it. And yet, it traveled everywhere. The paradox was obvious. At a time when steel was precious and fuel was counted, this object was almost embarrassingly cheap, disposable, replaceable. That was why it survived. Cards required no power, no maintenance, no explanation. Rules could be forgotten, new games invented, arguments resolved with laughter or a shrug. The deck adapted to boredom, stress, exhaustion, and fear without changing shape. It created structure where none existed. In camps, in barracks, in hospital wards, in prisoner cages. Minutes became rounds. Hours became hands. Nights became manageable. No card ever promised comfort. It promised focus, and focus kept minds from collapsing inward. That mattered more than anyone admitted.
The human brain does not shut down under stress. It narrows. In war, thoughts loop. Fear repeats itself. The mind searches for threats even when none are present. Rest becomes shallow. Time stretches. Cards interrupted that loop. Not by distraction, but by engagement. Shuffling demanded attention. Counting required accuracy. Anticipating the next move forced the brain to stay in the present moment. This mattered physiologically. Focused tasks reduce cortisol. Repetition calms neural noise. Simple rules give the brain boundaries when reality has none. For soldiers, this wasn't theory. It was relief. A game didn't erase memories. It paused their dominance. Hands stayed busy. Eyes tracked patterns. Minds followed sequences instead of fears. Even losing had value. It externalized frustration. It gave tension a safe exit. That's why cards appeared everywhere pressure was highest. Front lines, field hospitals, transport ships. The deck didn't change the situation. It changed how the brain carried it. And that difference determined endurance. A mind that could reset, even briefly, could return to duty intact. That was survival.
Cards didn't ask where you were from. They didn't care about rank, accent, or education. Once the deck hit the table, differences softened. Rules replaced introductions. A nod meant your turn. A pause meant wait. A flipped card meant everything. In units thrown together overnight, this mattered. People who shared no history found a rhythm within minutes. They learned each other's habits without speaking. Who bluffed? who hesitated, who played safe when tired. Trust formed quietly, not the kind written into reports, the kind that lets silence feel comfortable. In hospitals, cards did something else. They equalized time. Patients who could not walk could still play. Wounded hands adapted. The game bent to injury. In camps and cages, cards were riskier, but when they appeared, they brought something forbidden: normalcy. For a moment, guards became background, fences faded. People remembered how to be people. The deck didn't build friendship, it built familiarity, and familiarity reduces fear. That's why cards survived censorship, confiscation, and suspicion. They looked harmless. They were not. They connected.
War breaks schedules first. Meals slip, sleep fragments, days blur into one another. Without structure, fatigue spreads faster than fear. Cards quietly restored order. A game needed a start. It needed turns. It needed an end. Those boundaries mattered. Men showed up on time because a hand was waiting. They stayed alert because a move depended on them. They accepted loss because rules made it fair. That fairness translated. If you could respect the rules of a game, you could respect watch rotations, shared rations, unspoken agreements. Discipline returned in small doses. Cards didn't replace command, they supported it. Officers noticed without admitting it. Units that played together argued less. Tension released in predictable ways instead of erupting. The game created consequences without punishment. Miss a turn, and the table moved on. Cheat, and the group corrected you. No authority required. That self-regulation was rare under pressure. In transit ships, cards synchronized sleep cycles. In camps, they marked evenings. In hospitals, they defined recovery time. The deck didn't enforce morale, it enforced rhythm. And rhythm, under stress, is stability. After the war, life sped up. Schedules returned. Entertainment multiplied. Screens took over the quiet hours. What once filled the night became something you reached for only when bored. Cards were demoted. They moved from footlockers to drawers, from necessity to nostalgia, from survival tool to casual pastime. The reason was simple. Pressure disappeared, or at least it looked like it had. When days felt predictable, there was no need for small rituals to hold them together. When stress had names and timelines, the mind no longer needed constant anchoring. So the deck waited. It didn't compete with televisions. It didn't chase attention. It didn't modernize. And then pressure returned, in new forms. Hospitals used cards again. Shelters brought them out during outages. Soldiers carried them into new conflicts. Families reached for them when power failed. The pattern repeated. Whenever systems collapsed or attention fractured, the deck reappeared. Not because it was fun, because it worked. Cards were never outdated. They were context-dependent. They mattered most when nothing else did.
The deck of cards never claimed importance. It didn't signal emergencies. It didn't promise solutions. It didn't change outcomes on paper. What it protected was less visible. It protected attention. In a world that fractures under pressure, the ability to focus, even briefly, is a form of resilience. Cards offered that focus without cost, without infrastructure, without permission. They asked people to stay present, to wait their turn, to accept chance without panic. Those habits mattered, because war doesn't only destroy bodies, it erodes patience, cooperation, and trust. When those fail, systems collapse from the inside. The deck of cards resisted that erosion, quietly, repeatedly, anywhere it was needed. Its legacy isn't about nostalgia or games. It's about understanding that survival includes the mind, not just the supply list. Modern life hides stress behind convenience, but when convenience breaks, the same pressures return, and the same tools still work, not because they are clever, but because they are human.
The deck of cards never saved lives directly. It kept people capable of living them.